Hey guys, how is it going? Do you miss me? I miss you guys, man. It's been a hot minute now that I'm situated in my new place. Hopefully we have some videos coming for you guys, and we're gonna start out with one that I am really feeling right now, which is the Junkyard Pontiac build. So Pontiac parts right now are super expensive and on their way up again. So let's have a talk about Pontiac Junkyard parts and what you need to look for to kind of build a good setup. And actually, I think it might be cheaper than you really expect. So let's go ahead and share my screen here and take a peek at what we got. So we're going to start out this build. This is what I've found as a basic junkyard build a lot of the times around here for us anyway. So we're sitting with again, 400, mid-70, I think 73 casting on this one. 6x8 heads were on it, stock intake, stock Q-jet, 067 cam, factory exhaust logs. And then below here, I've got a bunch of parts lists that I would suggest as I just want to click through. So what we're going to start out here is, yeah, dude, the exhaust looks restrictive, right? Because we're going to say this is in a Trans Am or a Firebird. A lot of these cars would have 2-inch exhaust on these logs, and you're just going to be so restrictive. I mean, take a look at this. We're saying 255 horsepower at 4,000 RPM, and that just doesn't do for my money. And the torque numbers also just aren't there. So what would I change on this if I wanted to be cost effective? Well, if I don't want to take the cam out, the first thing that I can do to get a big power gain here is I'm going to spend $500 at a shop and get these heads milled. Usually, that'll bring it down to about 8.8 compression ratio with these heads. Which is a pretty massive gain, as we're going to see here. So again, a little power bump, a little torque bump, but the bigger thing here is the actual gains on overall, right? Your peaks are one thing, but the overall average is what Pontiac is all about. So that's a pretty solid gain. But our main choking point right now is going to be exhaust. This cam is small, right? But it can move air. So the first thing that I actually would do personally is I would go ahead and pick up a pair of Flowtech heads or just some kind of basic headers, I guess I should say. So just basic street headers that are cheap and get me going. I would try to go 1 5/8 38-inch primary, hit this. And I'm going to change out to 2.5-inch exhaust as well with a pretty basic muffler. I'm going to go duals because that's just easiest for me now with the crossover. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK on that, and now we're going to calculate performance again. And you see now we have broke 300 horsepower pretty reliably at pretty low RPM and range. And what that does for the torque is the bigger picture here. So you see the gains are massive, and that's with the exhaust, right? So the exhaust is heavily restrictive on these stock cars. So, I mean, at this point, we're, call it $1,000 into it to make an extra 4,500 RPM. What is that? Like 60 horsepower? I mean, that's huge for that price. And even if this car had a 68 cam in it, that would obviously be a much better starting point. But say I have the money for a cam, right? And while my heads are off, I'm like, hey, I'll switch this cam out while I'm at it. Now, I would go for a Spots Performance cam right now with this specific setup. Anything over 8.5 to about 9.2, I think that the 68 high lift cam is a phenomenal option. And there's a link for that in the description down below if you want to check that out. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into that and make sure I select the right cam here instead of optimize. So pick. These are our specs. We're going to hit my button here, hit performance, and again, massive gains, man. And it's just big gains after big gains, and that's just really what it's all about with building cars this way. It makes it a ton of fun. It makes it a lot of fun to do it this way. So our baseline is just, why drive this car compared to this? And at this point, we're sitting around $1,500. Call it $2,000 in parts if you want to highball it. And this is parts that you pretty much had laying around. Now, you can achieve the same thing with 068 cam if you go with a 1:7:5 ratio rockers. That will give you the higher lift. You won't get the extra duration. I mean, you will, but you won't, depending on how your ratio is and things like that. But that's also going to mean you're to pop your heads off. You're going to have to machine that out a little bit to make sure your rockers work and your push rods are fine and, all that good stuff. But guys, there's a lot of pieces to this car that actually you still could keep adding power. But obviously, we want to do this as effectively and as cheaply as possible, and I think this is an excellent way to do it. Now, if you guys have any suggestions on what you'd like to see, feel free to comment down below. Let me know. Have a good one, guys. I'll see you around.